Hey everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today we're talking with Rob Wentz, leadership communication expert, best-selling author, social media marketer and strategist, award-winning radio personality and speaker, influencer, and founder of the Unstuck Movement. I'm super excited about this because we have a lot to talk about. So with that, welcome, Rob. And thanks a lot for joining us.
Oh, yeah, Brett. Great to be here. Great to meet you. Glad to be a part of the platform. So just excited to get into things.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I got a lot of stuff I want to ask you. So to start off, you've accomplished a lot, obviously, in many areas here in the ring. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your background, though, to start off. Can you tell us how you got the start in your career and sort of what led you to where you are now?
Oh, yeah. This goes way back to when I was 15 years old. So I always wanted to be in radio broadcasting. I always loved radio. So I spent 20 years as a radio DJ, working for a dozen or more radio stations, doing everything and anything in the radio world. At the end of my run up to 2017, I was hosting a morning show for about 6 years that was pretty popular, and really loved what I was doing. But I knew I was meant to do more, and I always felt I was supposed to be creating something for myself, right? Because in radio, just like creating content, I could kind of create my own thing, but it was still kind of run by somebody else. Other people were really at the helm of what I was doing, and I felt I was handcuffed, and I kind of had only reached as far as I could go in my radio broadcasting career. So I had built a decent social media following during this point in time, and so I learned digital marketing I started learning that in like 2015, launched my company in 2017, left radio, ran the digital marketing company 2017 up through 2021. Through the pandemic, I kind of lost my passion for it. I'm very much a people person. I didn't realize how much of a people person I was until I was sitting in front of a computer every day running Facebook ads and Instagram ads and Google ads, and I was like, man, I can't. This isn't for me. It's like, in life it's interesting. Sometimes you'll find things that you're good at, but that drain you. And then you'll find things you're good at that give you energy. And as I looked at my life, I was like, radio, I was good at it and it gave me energy. I loved doing it. Digital marketing, I was good at it, but it just drained me every day. I felt like I was a shell of my former self. And while I was doing the digital marketing, I had a podcast going. And I interviewed this woman about an hour and a half from me. And she was a life coach and a business coach. She'd been doing it for like 20 years. And we had a podcast, and she said to me, Rob, I think you'd be an amazing coach. If you ever, want to think about coaching, reach out to me. I'd love to train you. A year went by after that podcast, and I was really stuck. The name of the Unstuck Movement, right? That's where the podcast name came from, because I was really stuck where I was at. I was going through a divorce, and I knew I was not like doing what I was supposed to be doing, connecting with people, helping people. And her name, Peggy Caruso, popped in my head. And I was like, I haven't thought of that name in like a year. So I called her up, and I was like, Peggy, I had a decent amount of money saved up where I was kind of like able to give myself some space. And I was like, let's do this coaching. So for 7 months, we did the coaching. We did a year plan in about 7 months. And I got certified in life coaching and business coaching, got a leadership certificate along the way, communication certifications, and immediately I knew this is where I was supposed to be. Not saying coaching's easy, because it's not, especially starting off just with like no clients or anything. And I live in an area I live in the central Pennsylvania, right? So we don't really fully understand what coaching is yet. It's some cities you go to and it's like everybody's a coach, and you hear coaching so often. Where I'm from, it's kind of a newer term. And so branching out into that at first was a bit treacherous, but it was exactly where I was supposed to be. And it's amazing, man. These past almost 3 years have been incredible, just for me in my own personal transformation, but also in my professional transformation. And I turned 40 a year and a half ago, right? So I felt like 40. I got remarried, and I launched into my coaching career right around the time of turning 40. And it's like a new start to my life, right? So like kind of starting things fresh. They say when you turn 40, you get like a second life. And that's what I feel like is happening right now. Really cool period of time. But that's kind of the journey of going from, radio DJ to leadership communication coach. I brushed over a lot of stuff there. There's a lot of story there, but that's kind of the general path that I took to get to where I am today.
That's really fascinating. I got to touch on something that you said in the beginning of that, and that is there are certain things we do that we might be good at, but they drain us, and then there are things that sort of empower us. Well, a funny sort of parallel story. So I've been a digital entrepreneur for 17 years, and one of the things for me is I never had a mentor, never had a coach. There's people that I work with in my industry, but they're all remote. So we're connected by Skype and stuff like that. And I love technology. I love, marketing. I love business. So a lot of those things I really enjoyed. But one of the things that I recognized throughout that process is how lonely it is. It's so isolating. It's so different than when you work in an office with people and things like that. And that was the piece that I missed. So it was getting to a point where it was really starting to drain on me as well. And I started the podcast for the express purpose to help people that were entrepreneurs that were trying to start something and doing it in isolation to recognize that, hey, there's other support out there for you. Other people have done this. It's important that we stay connected. And I have to tell you, one of the things, the best part of my day every day is when I have an opportunity to talk to somebody like you. We get on a show and talk for a half hour, 45 minutes, because I just find it so invigorating. It's definitely the thing that I'm super passionate about. I just love doing that, and it's amazing the difference when something fuels you versus drains you, whether you're good at it or not. So that's amazing. But what a cool story, and it was really nice that you had her name popped up and you remembered that. And I have to tell you, so many times I've talked to people where there was one person that they met that sort of alters the trajectory of their life in a sense because they just plant that seed. And then you start thinking about it, and then you come back to it later and you're like, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, that was really a good idea. So you mentioned before that there was a dream that you had that changed your life. Can you tell us about that?
Oh yeah, man. So 2021, I was I was really lost. I was really stuck. I was in like a 2 year, well, yeah, 2 year separation, and then eventually divorced from my ex-wife. And it was just like this. It was very much a limbo, wilderness sort of period of my life. And I had this dream one night. It was just a really profound dream because I've always been somebody who's, for lack of a better term, worried about where I'm going. Right, like I want to grow, I want to get better, but I'm like kind of worried about it. I'm not exactly thinking about it in the right frame of mind. I had this dream. I was in a car with my grandma. My grandmother had passed away at the time, and she was driving the car, and she never drove. So it was like weird. Grandma's driving the car, and she's holding my hand, and it was weird. I looked down, but I was a kid. So I had like a little kid hand. I was like a 4-year-old, and so I was like a little kid, and she's driving the car. And while she's driving, she leans over and hugs me, and I'm like, Graham, what are you doing? You're going to wreck this car. Like, you're not paying attention. Pay attention to the road. And she said to me in the dream, don't worry about where we're going. Just love me. Don't worry about where you're going. Just love people. And so clearly it was God coming to me in the dream and speaking to me, giving me a message that is, if you're a person of faith, the tenet of the Bible, the main message, love the Lord God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself, right? So, stop worrying about so much about where you're headed and being so transfixed on like what's going to happen next. How am I going to get to where I'm going? Where am I going to go? How's it going to happen? Who am I going to meet? Where am I going to get the money from? All the things as an entrepreneur that come up on a repeated basis because you're doing this thing on your own. And focus on people and just how do you love people? How do you show up for people? Like, am I just loving people? And I'm not going to be honest, man, I'm not perfect at it to this day. It's a dream that like I'm reminded of it on a weekly basis because you can get lost and distracted so easily, but it has helped to reach to change my direction and to change the way I navigate through life is like, am I serving people more? Am I showing up for people more? Am I being more focused on how am I helping somebody, even if I'm not getting paid for it, right? So inside and outside of my business, like just in day-to-day life, am I smiling at people, having a conversation with somebody, helping somebody if they need help, just showing up for people in that way? And then when it comes to business, am I over delivering? Am I giving more than I'm getting, right? And since that dream, I've been led into a bunch of different situations in my life where I've taken this on, I pour out more than I take in, and it's paid off for me again and again and again. But we can lose sight, and I can personally lose sight. I grew up very selfish, and I'm probably still selfish, but not as selfish as I used to be. We're all selfish, right? Because you gotta, in order to survive, you have to be somewhat selfish, but there's focusing on me first was not working for me in so many areas of my life. And also just worrying about things so much, worrying about where the next thing's coming from. If you're showing up, adding value to people's lives and delivering for them and giving back, then it's gonna come back and benefit you. It's kind of like a law. So that dream for me was really profound because it helped me to refocus where I was at. And it's also something that, it wasn't just one time. Like that dream comes up, like I said, weekly, sometimes daily, depending on what's going on in my life. And it really, and also, so I knew the dream was impactful, right? Because I woke up from that dream and I was like uncontrollably sobbing, like crying. Like I've cried many times, but I've never cried like this. It was like embarrassing crying, like like unable to get a hold of myself kind of crying. And it made like an impressionable indent on me that I can't forget. But that was the dream, man. It was impactful, and I can see as time goes on, it's going to continue to play out in my life.
That is amazing. I mean, the dream, first of all, and then how it certainly altered the way that you think and the way you act. And I totally agree with you. First of all, I think that life in general is about relationships, and for me, I see parallels in some of the things you're saying because I've always been sort of a roll up my sleeves and get stuff done, and I can do it myself, and I'm going to go. And what I found is that just leads to loneliness. And like you said, it's actually more worry because you're so concerned all the time about getting the stuff done that you need to. Ultimately, it's so much more about relationships. I've found that even though I might work more and do more, if I'm engaged with other people, I feel less fatigued than I do when I'm doing it on my own. And to your point about serving other people, it's ironic because most people, when they are in a state of need, the whole mentality is, well, I want to give and I want to be giving to other people and stuff, but what I'm going to do is just take care of myself first. I've got to get my stuff in order and then also, and the irony is, it's when you don't do that, when you say it doesn't matter, I'm gonna do what I can for other people first and not worry about what I get back in return, that ultimately you take the brakes off what you're doing and everything starts to happen. It's almost paradoxical and it's fascinating, but I found exactly the same thing. The more that I sort of dug in and focused on me, the less satisfied, less happy, and ultimately less successful I
Mm-hmm.
think I was. And the more that I flipped it and said, you know what, how can I reach out to other people and serve them and show them something that might help them? The world seems to reflect that back on you. So I think it is super cool.
Yeah, it's
I
interesting,
know
right?
you,
I
you
just want to say one thing too, because
yeah,
I thought about it. I'm like, why, how does it work that way? And in a practical sense, it does make sense, right? Because when I'm just worried about me, I'm not really connecting with people and I'm not showing up for people the way I should be showing up. So when you start showing up for people and you feel like you have something really to give and help with, you are going to communicate with more people. You're going to make more connections. And when you talk to people for the first time or the 10th time or whatever, you're going to like light them up for the day. So you're going to be like somebody that really excites them. So you're going to be on their mind and they're going to be talking about you and they're going to be maybe referring you or whatever that might be, right? So from a spiritual sense, I totally understand why it works because that's just how things are designed to work. We're supposed to connect. We're supposed to help each other and serve each other. But on just a practical sense, it makes total sense. It's like, well, if I'm really being altruistic and excited to help others, then people are going to be like, man, this guy's awesome. I should connect him to this person. Oh, he's awesome. I should connect him to this other person. Oh, maybe we should do business together, right? You leave a lasting impression on people's minds where they want to like help you also. So I see why both make sense, and it's really cool. And like you said, paradoxical. Yeah, it doesn't make sense when you're doing it. It's like, why would that work? But it does, and you'll see it work in your life, and you're like, oh, okay, let's do it. Let's keep
Hey,
doing it.
the funny example of that is I don't know if you saw the thing a few years back about the Starbucks. There's people were in the drive-through line at Starbucks, and the one person pulls up and they said, "You know what? I'm going to pay for the order for the guy behind me." So they paid for theirs and then they paid for the one behind them. So that person got to the window and they were like, "It's free." And they're like, "What do you mean?" "Well, the guy in front of you paid for it." "Okay, well, I'm going to pay for the one behind me." And it went on and on and on. There were like hundreds of people that all paid for the person's order behind them. And it just shows you when the effect that it has also, because not only would they be thinking about you or talking about you and referring you, but also it makes them want to go out and do good things too. And when everybody's in that sort of state and giving and smiling at each other, it just does make the world a better place. So there's,
Yeah.
I mean, no doubt about that.
That just happened to me last week, actually, at Dunkin' Donuts. Somebody paid for
No
my
kidding.
order, and I was going to pay in cash. I had 20. I was going to pay for my order in cash, and the person said, "Oh, the person in front of you paid for me." And I'm like, "Oh, that's amazing." And I was like, "Well, just take this 20 and pay for the other ones behind me." And then, yeah, who knows? So you don't know how far
It's
that kept going.
awesome.
That's cool that you say that, because that literally just happened to me.
Yeah, they actually wrote this big thing about it because it was hundreds of people. I mean, it was like all day long that it kept going on. So it was amazing. So I know you've talked about times when we find ourselves behaving or doing things that are inconsistent with really what our goals are, our values, our vision, sometimes even opposite. I know I've actually experienced that in my life sometimes too, where I sort of, I had a V8 moment where I smacked myself in the head and I'm like, why would I do that when I know all I had to do is make that call today and I would have like gotten this deal or solved it. Do you know why it is that we do that sometimes and how we can fix it?
Well, why? I think there's different reasons why we all might do it, but it boils down to integrity, right? So integrity is the value that I hold the highest. It's the value that I strive towards every day, which is basically just keeping promises to yourself. Do I keep the promises to myself that I say I'm going to do? The more I do that, the better I feel. The more I keep promises to myself, the better I feel like I am as a human being, the more aligned I am with who I know I'm supposed to be. And it's just, when I used to feel like I wasn't me, right? So I felt like there was a version of me in me that I didn't know how to get out. I didn't know how to like get this version of me out. And so a couple of different things there. One of the big things though, I think, is learning how to communicate and being confident in your communication. So when you know something needs to be said, you say it. When you know something needs to be done, you do it. And the more you do that for yourself, and the more you stop doing the things you know you don't want to do or you don't need to do, right? And we all have a long list of those things. So for me, it's like two different things. Am I saying things that, because sometimes there's something, a conversation that needs, this was me, I could think of this in a few different instances in my life when I was younger. There were conversations that needed to be had, and I wouldn't have those conversations for years, right? So like something I need to say to somebody, and even though they don't even know I need to say it, I know that I need to say it because it's going to release something in me, and you can feel that when it's happening. And so if you have one of those situations, you need to go have that conversation. As uncomfortable as it might be, as much as you don't want to do it, having that conversation is going to release something. It's going to free you up. It's going to get you unstuck, right? Because the Unstuck Movement, the name of my podcast, I got that because to get unstuck, you have to have movement, right? You have to take action to get unstuck. If you're stuck, I always think of that James Franco movie where he's like stuck in that rock 128 days or whatever that movie is called. I can't remember the name of it, but he's stuck in that rock. Like, what do they have to, he had to move. Something had to move to get him out. There had to be action taken to get him unstuck, right? So just like us, there's some sort of action you have to take to get unstuck. And so if you're really struggling to feel like you're really living I hate saying living your true self because it's so cliche and it's just I cringe whenever I hear that. But if you feel like you're not being who you know you're created to be, then there's a conversation that needs to be had, there's an action that needs to be taken, or there's actions that need to be stopped. And so I can't answer that question for everybody, but I can say for sure if you search yourself, you're going to find things that like, I need to be doing this and I'm not doing it. Or I keep doing that. Like just today, we have a 3-month-old son. He woke up at 6 a.m. I usually don't get up till around 6:30 or 7. And so my wife got up with him and I went back to sleep. I shouldn't have gone back to sleep. I should have just got up because I had less time because we have a 10-year-old also, and I had to get him to school and I had to get our youngest son to my mom's house to babysit. So I was just like crunched for time. And I'm like, man, this is a repeating pattern for me. I knew I should have got up 45 minutes earlier. I would have had so much more time, but I didn't do it, right? So it's one of those things, like I tell myself all the time, Rob, you know you're going to do this. When you do it, it's really good and you feel so much better. So you need to freaking do it, especially at 6 a.m. when you don't feel like getting up. Just do it, right? So we all have those little things in our lives that will come up over and over and over again, and you know they reveal themselves to you. That's the kind of stuff we need to work on. It's what I love is like it's simple stuff. It's never like super complicated, but often it's like something that's uncomfortable. It's something that might put you in an awkward situation. It's something like, especially a difficult conversation, you're not sure what the outcome is going to be, but you need to do those things. And that's, in general, what I always point to is everybody has those things, but they're different for most people. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely true. I mean, life is an interesting experience, that's for sure.
yeah.
So I know a lot of entrepreneurs get their start when they, have a problem, they have a challenge, they have an obstacle, they overcome it themselves, and then the whole idea is, okay, I want to help other people who struggle with that too, because it just makes logical sense. If I wasn't feeling good, sort of like the my journey as an entrepreneur, right? I was lonely throughout the whole thing, and yes, I mean successful in that regard, but it felt a little empty anyway because I first of all took a lot longer to get to where I should have been a lot faster because I didn't involve and engage with other people. But also, I recognize the fact that a lot of people have trouble even navigating that because you get to a point where you're like, it's not even worth it. It's so lonely. So that's the reason I did the podcast. So if somebody's in a situation where they're struggling, they have an obstacle, whatever, whether they've broken through it or not, is there a way that they can take that and turn that into the thing that they can do to help other people? Is there like a formula for that or a process?
That's what I don't know if that's what we should be doing, but that's one of the easiest things to do. I don't think that you have to do that. I mean, you don't have to build a business around the thing that I call it make your mess your message, right? I don't think you have to make the mess in your life a business. You can. It's definitely, I mean, I did. Sounds like you did, right? You've taken it and created something with it that can build you a following, can make you money, can get you leads, all kinds of different things, and build great connections. But at the same time, it can just be a hobby or something you do to volunteer, right? But you should, if you've made it through something, it's kind of like the 12-step program, right? If somebody is an alcoholic and they make it through the 12-step program, then they stay in the 12-step program and they become a sponsor for other people because you getting through something is one thing, but you helping somebody else get through the thing that you went through, I mean, that gives you purpose. That changes their life, and it like continues to heal you. It's like, it's interesting, right? Once you learn something, if you decide to teach that thing, then you start to understand that thing on a whole new level, on a different level. And so I don't know what else I don't know what other reason there would be to go through really difficult things if you're not going to take the thing and use it to help other people. It just doesn't make any sense. Why would you go through incredibly difficult things and then just never help anybody with it, never talk about it? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And if you think about like the most inspirational people, the people who have helped the most people, they've gone through really difficult times in their life. They take that thing, turn it around, make it a message that they can help other people with. And that message can be so powerful that it can be a building block or a stepping stone to build a business, to build a movement, whatever that thing might be. And so, just for me, just to use it in a practical term, so for me, when I was young, man, very low integrity, low self-esteem, low self-confidence. Really didn't like to talk to people. Really didn't like myself. Didn't even know myself. I wasn't an introvert, but I was an introvert because I was so unconfident in who I was. And so over the years, unknowingly, God really worked on me in this way that I did things that brought me out of my shell. And I didn't even know this is what I was trying to do. It's just like I gravitated towards certain things like radio broadcasting. I didn't know why I loved radio. It turns out it's because I didn't know how to communicate well, so it helped me to learn how to communicate. But it helped me to learn how in a safe place where I was talking in a room all by myself, thousands of people could hear me or millions of people could hear me, but I couldn't see any of them, right? So it was like a safe place for me to learn how to communicate. And so if we can do that, like I learned how to communicate in that way. So now I've taken these years of working on my communication skills to help other people communicate better. And when it comes to business, man, communication is the downfall or the victory piece of every business's success or failure. If you're going to fail, it's because of lack of communication, either with yourself or with your audience, with your target audience, right? Your customers or your clients or your employees. Communication is the key because you can build systems and processes that change everything through great communication. And so it's the building blocks for leadership. And I really truly do believe, if you are struggling somewhere in your life, you're not communicating effectively in some way, shape, or form, either with yourself or with the people around you. And if we can learn how to do that, if we can learn how to use the thing to change other people's lives, then it's a win-win all around. Jim Collins, the book Good to Great, right? They talk about how many wins can you create. If I can create a win for me and a win for you, that's why I love podcasting, right? I'm winning right now because you brought me on your show. I get to be exposed to your audience. Vice versa, you get to interview me so I can connect you to people that I know. Plus, people who are listening, they're also winning. If you have sponsors involved, those sponsors are getting attention. So there's so many different wins that can be created from one thing. And if you can find the more wins, then you're going to have more success in that place.
Yeah, I love that. And it is one of the things I love about podcasting for sure. So I've heard you talk about finding our life's purpose. Is there a simple question that we can ask that helps us do that?
I'm going to ask you this question. It's my favorite question to ask. What did you want to be, Brett, when you were 10 years old? What did you want to do with your life?
Ooh, when I was 10 years old, I remember being in class and I remember the teacher telling us the professions you want to go in are lawyer, doctor, this is where all the money is. These are all. So I don't know if I ever wanted to be an astronaut. Maybe I wanted to be a professional athlete. I'm just not that athletic. I'm not that big either. So that doesn't help. I don't know. Back then, I think for me, it was always about business. I was entrepreneurial when I was little. I didn't think of it in those ways where I was articulating it like that. But I mean, I was making chestnut necklaces and selling them door to door. I had two paper routes. I had lemonade stands. I was always doing that right from a really, really young age.
I love that. So why do you think you were doing it? Like, obviously to make some cash, but what were like some of the characteristics of wanting to be an entrepreneur that lit you up? What was it about that?
I think part of it is the fact that you're creating something for yourself. Like when you work a job, and I don't, maybe this is because my dad didn't get laid off till later, but when you work for somebody else, they write you a check, but you're sort of just a cog in the wheel of whatever they're doing. So you might still be creating. I mean, if you were an art person at, creating things for ad campaigns or whatever else, or product development. But I like the idea that you could be self-reliant. It's something that you could do yourself and you could sort of put part of yourself out there. And I think that for me, that was a lot of it. I also like the idea that you didn't have limits, right? There was some sort of open-endedness to the whole business and entrepreneurship thing because you could create something for yourself, but you could take it wherever you wanted it to go also. I think those were the elements of it that really attracted me to it.
Yeah, I love that, man. So Well, so you're already doing it, so it's an easy question to ask you. You're living the thing that you felt like you wanted to be when you were 10 years old, right? So that question for me is such a good question because sometimes you'll ask that question. I was doing a seminar a couple weeks ago and I asked a woman that question, and she said she wanted to be a paleontologist, but she wasn't a paleontologist. Now she was like a massage therapist and something, and she also did like some, I guess you could say, coaching. Like she helped people with their health and wellness and helped them get better. And I said, okay, interesting. So a paleontologist is digging up dinosaur bones, right? It's like, what is it? And she was like, so I don't see how those match. And I was like, well, what were the characteristics of the paleontology that you loved? Like, what was the essence of it that you loved? And she said, well, I love dinosaurs. I was okay, I don't think that applies. But she said, I love the mystery of it. So I love the mystery of uncovering some sort of secret and something that nobody else knew, or something that people did know at one point in time, but that was lost. And I was like, well, going into this health and wellness thing and helping people feel better and helping them heal and massage therapy, what is it about that you love? And she said, well, I love helping people find out the missing pieces that are like keeping them stuck or unhealthy or whatever that is. And I love helping people heal, and I love helping them uncover that, whatever that thing is. And I was like, exactly. There's an essence of that thing at 10 years old that, whether you're doing it now or not, what are you doing now that relates to that thing at 10 years old? And if there isn't anything that relates, then that's a good sign that you're probably on the wrong path. You're probably kind of miserable at what you're doing, and you're probably not living out your quote-unquote purpose. Another thing that I hate saying because it's so cliche, but I try to find a different word for it, but that's the word that always comes up, right? Everybody talks about their purpose. And so I love to use this because, like I said earlier, you don't have to build a business around the thing that is your life's passion, right? It doesn't have to be your business. It can be, and I find it to be super beneficial if it is, but it can just be a hobby. It can be something that is your volunteer work or something you just help other people with. But if you really want to uncover that, go back and ask yourself what you wanted to be when you were 10 years old, and then just pick out, I asked you that question, what are the characteristics of that? What is the essence of that? Anybody you ask that question to is going to have an answer. Like, well, here's what I loved about it. Okay, are you doing those things today in what you do in some way, shape, or form? And if you are, how can you do more of those things, right? So you built this podcast, right? I built my podcast because I asked myself this question. Like, when I was 10 years old, I was doing pretend radio shows in my bedroom. I loved radio for whatever reason. If I would have been older, if it would have been like today, I would have had a YouTube channel for sure, right? In my bedroom, no doubt. But the characteristics of that, what I loved about radio, of connecting with people, of having conversations, of lighting people up, making people laugh, having interesting conversations. Was I doing those in digital marketing? No, I was not doing enough of it. Maybe I was telling some stories by doing like Facebook posts or whatever, but I was not doing it how I needed to. So I relaunched my podcast at that point in time, and it literally changed my business. And then as I transitioned into coaching, it really transitioned my business, because I was like, no longer am I just coaching people a couple days a week and doing calls with them. I'm doing podcasts where I'm having, 3 to 4 to 5 conversations a week that are totally brand new, totally like a mystery that I have to kind of like learn about people and understand their stories and understand their paths. Just incredible, man. So I love that question, because it'll help you to find out like, oh, well, that's what I'm missing, or, oh, I'm on the right path, and how can I apply this more to what I'm doing?
It's amazing. It's disarmingly simple, but you can see how it sort of cuts through the clutter that we accumulate through, finding our career path and everything
Yeah.
else. Because some people do, end up doing what they're doing by default, right? It was the first
Right.
job they landed out of college or whatever it is. So that's what they do. And then once you start to go down that path and you start to make enough money and get enough track record, it's hard to switch, because you aren't going to be able to switch into something else and make as much. So then if you have debts and you have bills and things,
Yeah,
you
you've got
you
a
know
family, you got a
you feel
house.
stuck. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So
And so
it's
I think
easy.
of it like this too. And usually, like I said earlier, people end up doing something they're good at, but it drains them, right? It doesn't fill them up, but they're good at doing it. They're like, well, I'm good at this thing and it pays me good money, but I'm miserable, right? So maybe you could keep doing that thing, but find a way to fill in some of those characteristics of that thing you wanted to do when you were 10. Because when you were 10, you were old enough to know at 10, I love doing this thing, and I don't really need a reason why. I just love doing it. And you were young enough where the world hadn't like beaten that creativity out of you, right? So it's like a sweet spot of like, that's exactly where you should find the essence of that and go towards that thing.
Yeah, no, totally. I fully agree. I think it's important to have some outlet where we're connecting with that, even if it isn't professionally. So you talked a lot about communication. I fully agree. I think communication skills are so important. The best message in the world, if you can't get it out there in a way that resonates with people and that the right audience finds it, it's pretty difficult to succeed with anything. I also think the twin brother of communication is leadership. So if we're solopreneurs, right, we obviously need strong leadership just for ourselves. And of course, if we're running an organization, it goes without saying. I know you've talked about integrity driven leadership. Can you tell us what that is?
Well, going back to the integrity part of this, right? What is integrity? Keeping the promises to yourself. We have, at least what I feel like in our culture, a bad a bad idea of what leadership is. Because if you ask most people, like, they think of a leader as their boss or their manager, somebody that was put into that position that probably is not fulfilling the leadership role appropriately in their job, right? So, and then we try to, like, I'll ask people this question in seminars and workshops, like, when you think of the word leader, who pops into your head? And some people can't even name a person. And I'm like, so this word is so dumbed down in our culture, so like misused in our culture, that leadership is just like almost a bad thing. And I used to think this. I was like, I don't want to be a leader. I don't want to be in charge of anything. That sounds terrible. I want to be able to, get high and just float through life and do whatever I was doing, and then whatever happens will happen, right? But I'm not responsible. I don't want to be responsible for what happens. And I, as time went on and I woke up, I was like, oh, right. If I'm not leading my own life, somebody else is. And why am I miserable? Why was I so miserable? Because I wasn't leading my own life. I was letting life just kind of dictate whatever was going to happen. And I didn't like most of the stuff that was happening. And I didn't like the way that I felt. And I didn't like the way that the results were playing out. So I had to do something about it. And so integrity, keeping promises to yourself. So if you're going to be a great leader for a team or for a business, then you really better be leading your own personal life well. And if you're not leading your personal life well, then your family's probably not going well. Your personal relationships probably aren't going well. And your business relationships definitely aren't going well. It's those things. It's very hard to keep. You might be able to succeed in business for a while without having great personal leadership, but over the course of time in your life, it's going to fall apart. The cracks are going to show. And you hear this all the time, CEOs or whatever that are burned out, stressed out, their personal life's a mess and things like that. It happens all the time. And it's easy for it to happen because you can get so caught up in winning, right? Winning in business might, because like you hear so often too, like if somebody's home life is a wreck, they bury themselves in their business, in their work, right? Because that makes them feel fulfilled. And you can run from your personal life for a long time, but eventually it's going to catch up to you. And so if we're living from an integrity place of leadership, then my integrity is like every day I'm keeping promises to myself. And if I'm keeping promises to myself and I'm doing what I know I should be doing, then I'm naturally going to show up for other people better. So I'm going to then encourage other people to keep promises to themselves. So I'm going to be, instead of telling other people what to do, I'm going to be empowering them to make their own decisions, right? To give people personal accountability. Say I'm the leader of a company and I just go around and I tell everybody else what to do all the time. It's not going to go well. Nobody's going to like that. They're not going to like me, and I'm not going to get the results that I want. But if I empower other people to make their own decisions, right? I kind of am just guiding them, like kind of like a Yoda. Like you're the guide, and you're kind of guiding them as heroes. I love Story Brand by Donald Miller, right? Donald Miller and Story Brand, it's all about you are the guide and the hero is your customer. So if you're a boss, you're the guide and the employees are your heroes. And those heroes have to find their own journeys. You have to empower them to find their own plan. Now, you can help them with the plan. You can agree with the plan and keep them on track and help them be accountable for the plan, but they have to come up with the plan and they have to do it themselves. So they have to make the decisions, and then they have to continue to achieve those decisions themselves, which would be the integrity part of that. They have to say what they're going to do, and they have to do what they say they're going to do. And if you help people do that, and you do that yourself, your life's going to straighten itself out just naturally, because that's how things are supposed to go. That's how things are supposed to run. And we have because of the way that I think the job market is, of bosses just telling us what to do, and people don't want to take leadership because they find that's too much work or too much of a responsibility on themselves, you're always going to be unsatisfied. That's just how it's. Even if you work for a company, be an intrapreneur, right? Be somebody who makes things happen inside of the company. You're not being, well, you can still do what you're being told to do, but you also make things happen for yourself outside of your day-to-day job, because you are internally driven. You have this internal integrity of, you know what needs to get done, and you're going to do it because you've kept those promises to yourself. And I just, in essence, that's integrity-based leadership. We all should be striving for that and working towards that. And if you're not, step back and be like, okay, like I said earlier, where am I not keeping promises to myself? And if I start doing that, feel the difference on a day-to-day basis, and the domino effect from there, you can't even fathom the positive results of the domino effect that can happen from you doing that.
It's really powerful. The other thing about it is, when you when you enable other people to find and they also take ownership.
Yeah.
So interestingly, it takes more off of your plate, because instead of micromanaging and telling everybody what to do all the time, you don't need to, because they're self-directed at what they're doing. So you don't need to constantly be standing over them to make sure stuff's getting done, because they're bought into the process. So I think that's a
Exactly.
great tip, great advice, and really powerful way to do it. Okay, so where can people find you, find your products, find your services, connect with you?
Yeah, just go to the website. Well, below here on my name, you see robzwentz.com. So I have launched this platform along with my leadership platform, my coaching platform. I'm helping people who want to launch their own platforms, like you and I are doing, to launch their own podcast. So this is something that I started this year because I really felt that people want to have an outlet where they express themselves, they build great relationships, they make incredible connections that you can also make money with, and you can become the leader, the authority in your space, the expert in your industry. So I'd encourage anybody who's excited about that, who wants to become somebody who has a platform, that runs a platform that just makes them the expert at what they do, the authority in their space, but also builds incredible relationships. You can go to robzwentz.com. We have a wait list on there for the Pro Podcaster Academy. So I encourage anybody who wants to find out more about that, go there. And if you want to just connect with me, then you can search me out on LinkedIn, Rob Z Wentz, and shoot me a DM and we can chat.
Listen, thanks for that. And I have one last question that I have to ask, because I think it's really important. I'd love to know what everyone's perspective is. And that is, what's your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
Man, I'll just go back to the thing I've been talking about this whole time, the integrity. Keep promises to yourself. Search yourself. Where am I not aligning up? Where am I not lining up with where I'm supposed to be? You're out of alignment somewhere. Find out what it is. How do I keep these promises? How do I make that a staple in my life? And the dominoes will start to line up and fall, man. I hate to say it's that simple, but really for me it has been that simple. The more I keep promises to myself, the more success I have, and the easier things get. So I would just stick with that one law right there.
Awesome. Appreciate that. All right. With that, it's just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again so much, Rob, for sharing all your insights, great tips with us. Visit leadimpacttransform.com to learn more about how he serves as a leadership coach. Now you can schedule a one-on-one call with him. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, remember, no matter what you want from your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.